you know, and we'll test this fine. Now. Hi, and welcome to Flap and Focus. Massachusetts is considered a blue state by the rest of the country, and even Massachusetts itself, a state dominated by the Democratic Party. However, 20 of the last 28 years, the chief executive officer in the state has been a Republican. The governor has been a Republican. I'm here today with one of the gentlemen who wants to change that. I have Bob Massie here.
Nice
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to FATV. Welcome to Central Mass.
Yeah.
And so just for those people who don't know Bob Massie, for those who don't know you, our viewers on the internet, on Facebook, and on regular old TV, why don't you tell the viewers a little about yourself?
Well, I'm someone, first of all, I have been out in Central Mass regularly. I have tremendous fondness for Fitchburg and for all the areas around. I used to come on vacation from time to time, and I have a lot of friends here. So I feel I do know the community a bit, although I'm from Somerville. I've lived in Somerville for the last 35 years. I'm a social justice, economic justice activist. I've worked on those issues for a long time. I started off actually as a minister in the Episcopal Church way back in the early 1980s. But then I became very interested about how to bring prosperity to communities like Fitchburg or other communities that maybe aren't seeing enough prosperity, enough investment. So I did something unusual. I actually enrolled at Harvard Business School and got a doctorate there, not to necessarily go off and make a lot of money in finance for myself, but to be a better advocate and somebody who really understands the local economy. So that's something I've worked on for many, many years. I've been a teacher. I've done other things. I've run coalitions that bring businesses and investors and local activists together. Most recently, right before running, I was running a program at UMass Boston, what we called the Sustainable Solutions Lab, which again brought, it was the business school, the policy school, and the environment school, in that particular case, to try to think about what is the impact going to be of climate change on areas throughout Massachusetts, which unfortunately is something we're going to have to deal with. So I've had an unusual background. I've had the privilege of running national and even international organizations. And fundamentally, I think that we could be doing so much more to building our economy and particularly getting ready for the challenges of the future. My biggest concern about Governor Baker is that we have things that we should be doing today in order to be ready for tomorrow, and he just doesn't seem that interested in those topics. So I've been in about 300 communities in Massachusetts, and I'm really happy to be back here in Fitchburg, which is one of my favorite places.
Well, speaking of which, when residents of north central Massachusetts are making their choice for governor or really any political office, one area in which we, as residents of this area, are sensitive to is, well, what can this person do for us? We feel slighted, we feel ignored, we feel that a lot of the money goes east, and a lot of everything else just sort of gets grabbed there, almost like a magnet east, and so we can feel slighted. So what, in your travels through central Massachusetts and north central Massachusetts especially, why don't you talk about some of the areas in which you see are areas of concern or areas of need, and you can even distinguish where things that you believe Governor Baker is doing well that can be expanded upon, or things that he is ignoring that need to be addressed. Specific areas of need that you see in north central Mass.
Well, I mean, I see first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, people who feel that Central Mass and North Central Mass has been ignored are correct. It has been ignored. And that's also true of many parts of Western Mass. So the idea that the people and the elites, the business elites and political elites should be paying more attention is absolutely true. I want to be a people's governor for the whole state. Now, specifically, you know, if we think back on Franklin Roosevelt, and as a Democrat, I still tremendously drawn to the values of Franklin Roosevelt. You know, even in 1944, he said, what is it that makes us strong as a nation? What do we need to be free? What is our liberty based on? And he said, look, it's having access to a good home, a good school, a good doctor, and a good job. Those are kind of the pillars. And right now, in this area,
American dream, so to speak.
American dream, but you have to have those pillars. You don't have a home, you don't get an education, you don't have medical care, and you can't get a job. The American dream is going to stop right there. So a lot of people need to have access to those things, and you know, for most people, it's getting harder. You know, people can't afford their rents. There are different parts of the state that have worse, more serious or less serious problems with housing, but it's a big problem. Or affording a house, or staying in a house. Foreclosure remains a problem all over the state, and particularly in central and western Mass. And I've talked to a lot of folks about that. Getting adequate medical care. I mean, we have a system that remains broken, even though we put Mass Health in place. I favor single payer, and one reason for that is that I was born with a serious illness called hemophilia that prevented me from walking. And I finally got back to walking because I lived in a country that believed in health care as a right, but that was actually in Europe because my parents are writers and we moved there. So I can walk today because I got health care. Now, a lot of people don't have that. They can't afford the premiums, they can't afford the deductibles, or they simply don't have the coverage. So that's a problem. So home and school is also an issue. I mean, you have Fitchburg State and you have a number of, although it's not called Fitchburg State anymore, Fitchburg University?
Fitchburg State University.
State University. Yep. Well, I've been there many times. It's an extraordinary place. But, you know, our entire school system, whether it's K through 12, whether it's our UMass or state colleges or community colleges, they're underfunded. They've been seriously underfunded for almost 20 years. You need a governor who cares about that and who's going to be willing, because if you look at a place like Fitchburg, just specifically, with about 40,000 people, the economy is deeply tied to an anchor institution like Fitchburg State. So, and so home, school, doctor, and then of course jobs. You know, we need local investment. That's something I've worked on for many years. We need to be able to support local business. So I'm the kind of person who worries a bit about the impact of big business that sometimes can bend the rules in their direction, but I am a strong supporter of small business, making capital available, different forms of ownership, allowing people to build the communities that they live in with money from the local area. So those are just a couple of areas, but the reality is that to create prosperity for today and increase it for tomorrow, we need a very alert governor, willing to act, willing to pay attention to the communities that have been overlooked. I think I'm exactly that person.
And specifically, what about manufacturing and industry? One area that cities like Fitchburg and even Leominster to an extent, and even if you go a little bit east of here, like Lowell, Lawrence, cities hit by a decline in manufacturing, goods not being produced here in New England, either relocating to the south or relocating overseas. Well, what are some initiatives that you would like to see to possibly bring manufacturing back, sustainable manufacturing industry back to this area?
Well, the reality is, because of the global economy, or even our big national economy, some of those manufacturing jobs aren't coming back because they can be made, the products can be made cheaply other places. And that's a tragedy, and I think we should have been better prepared for it, but it's the reality. However, we are seeing the rise in higher tech manufacturing, that is making more refined products or products that are needed in the for other things, in other words, machine products or specialized products. We also have the possibility of creating more wood-based products in a place in this area. But to do that, you really need trained workers. And that's one of the things I don't think that we have invested enough in. Our vocational schools, making it possible for communities or even in some cases unions to offer training training programs, because in many cases you can't just go into one of those higher level manufacturing jobs just from scratch or just with a high school degree. You have to have special training. So as governor, I want to make sure that we pay special attention to our vocational training systems, which in some parts of the state are doing okay and others are dramatically underfunded. So that's the key. You got to be ready. You know, any business will tell you, I can't just think about today, I have to be ready for tomorrow, and I have to invest to be ready for tomorrow. And that's a rule that just right now isn't being applied. We are not putting enough into what will make us prosperous today and tomorrow.
And I might suggest that you go a little bit down the road here, literally a couple miles away, if you stay on 2A, Monty Tech, Montechusett Regional Vocational Technical School, fabulous facility, and sort of has that mission statement in mind.
Right.
Even, you know, and what is your, because one thing that I hear more of that I didn't hear years ago is, well, the whole, because you talked about the American dream, you talked about the stereotypical, you know, these are the types of things that we think of when we think of the American dream. And part of that, you know, was going to college. One thing I'm hearing more is that college is not necessarily for everyone, that there can be a way in which, you know, you talked about our vocational schools, vocational and technical schools, a way to utilize vocational and technical training maybe in place of a college education. What is your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, one of the reasons the American dream was so successful, particularly in the post-war period, is that many jobs you just needed a high school education. In some cases, you didn't even need that. Now, as you've pointed out, we often need more than that, but the traditional liberal arts four-year degree may be not exactly the perfect fit. So that, again, says we need to put the investment in vocational training. Now, at the high school level, one of the things that's happening is that, and I learned about this actually here in Central Mass, is that some people are getting into high school vocational training as a way of getting into a four-year college. You know, their parents might say, look, you could have something to fall back on or whatever. Well, the problem with that is that then takes away from spots from people who want to go to vocational high school and training and who are not going on to college. So there's a bit of a tension from the people who use vocational training as an extra qualification to get into four-year college, and those who want to go straight to working. So we're going to have to sort that out. And part of the way we sort it out is that we increase the available slots, and then we also make sure that the people who are coming into vocational training are serious about staying in those fields. But let's face it, I mean, this is a rapidly changing economy, and it's not just enough to provide support for individual businesses. You need support for infrastructure. You need faster trains. You need a statewide transportation system. You know, because everywhere I go in the state, everywhere, I hear we are too isolated. Our transportation is too slow. We can't get around. You know, I'm glad to hear that things are doing a bit better in Fitchburg transportation. But you know, as we were talking about, let's move that out to Leominster. Let's move it to Gardner. Let's make it faster. Let me give you one quick example. China has 12,000 miles of high-speed rail. The United States has 0. And if you're in a competition and the score is 0 to 12,000, who's winning? So we also need to move to renewable energy. We are wasting $18 billion on fossil fuel that most countries are phasing out. Unfortunately, this governor is doubling down on fossil fuel when we could be moving to solar, we could be moving to municipal power, we could be moving to wind energy. So I'm saying there's many opportunities that are coming up, but we need to be prepared for them. We need to create the infrastructure for them, and to do that, you need to have a governor who thinks about today and tomorrow. And that's where I think this governor has failed.
I can refer you to a couple of folks who you know, ride the commuter rail on a daily basis that you'd probably be interested in talking to when you talk about improving rail infrastructure.
I had a wonderful person who worked on my campaign very closely with me, and she came from Fitchburg every day, and it was a long trek to get from Fitchburg into Boston and to Somerville, where our headquarters were, and then turn around and do it at the end of the day. And so at a certain point, she felt that there was just too much, even though we thought she's one of our most wonderful employees. So no, it's a very real problem, and I've heard about it. And again, it doesn't just affect North Central Mass. It affects everywhere. It affects Western Mass. It affects the South Coast and South Shore, all those places, Fall River or New Bedford are struggling because of a lack of decent transportation. So we have to have a proactive governor who believes that part of the role of governor is setting us up for success in the future. And I worry that if Charlie Baker gets 4 more years, we'll have 4 more years of basically sitting still.
Shifting gears a little bit,
Sure.
but leading into that a little bit, actually. You have an opponent in the primary election coming up,
right.
Jay Gonzalez, and who actually received the endorsement of the delegates,
right.
More delegates at the state convention.
Right.
So talk a little bit about how your platform or ways in which you differ from Jay Gonzalez. I'll go on the assumption, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'll go on the assumption that whoever comes out of the primaries, the other one will get behind the other.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you could outline the differences.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me go back to the point about the convention. We have a very strange, and I would argue broken, system of how we elect candidates here. So for one thing, you talked about the governors, Republican governors. One of the main reasons that our governors do not line up with the values of most people is because we have a very late primary. This primary is the day after Labor Day. Most primaries are in June around the country. Now, what does that mean? It means that Democrats run against each other and spend their money and get tired, and their supporters. And then we have a primary, and we usually run against a Republican who's been raising money, who's already in a ticket, and that was true with Governor Weld, it was true with Governor Romney, and it was true with Governor Baker. So they have more money, they don't have opponents. Often, Governor Baker has a primary opponent, but that's rare. So that's the structural reason. It's not that we love Republican governors, it's that the Republican structure of their party means they usually put up one candidate and we have several. And then the other thing is that the convention is the vote of party insiders. It's people elected at local town committees, and some of them are new, but many of them have been part of the party for a long time, and so they tend to go with someone they're familiar with. Jay Gonzalez was the budget chief, a spreadsheet guy. They've known him, they like him, he's a perfectly good guy. But he is a creature of Beacon Hill. I'm somebody who's completely different. I'm from outside. I've run organizations from the outside. I'm somebody who has very bold ideas. Now, it's true that at the level, we both favor single payer. He's favored it recently. I've favored it for 40 years. We both are committed to worker rights, but he's relatively recent on that. I'm a member of a union. My wife is a member of a union. She's a professor, so she helps to make sure that her faculty get decent benefits and decent pay. So, there's that difference. I'm also someone who is very bold. Like, I think we need to grab the opportunity and move quickly on renewable energy, both to block climate change and to make Massachusetts a leading state in manufacturing and beyond. So I really represent, I think, even though our policies are somewhat similar, our backgrounds are very different, our personalities, our record of achievement is very different, and I think the boldness of our energy and vision is different. And so people will have an interesting choice. Do they choose a more moderate, more inside guy who is going to sort of maintain the traditional Democratic Party, which I do support many values, or are they going to go with someone who has a record of making deep and important changes to get us ready for the future?
Some of these infrastructures that you've talked about will have to be paid for, obviously.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit off air before you got here about the voters of central Massachusetts and north central Massachusetts, sort of a conservative streak woven throughout, right, otherwise being socially moderate, right, and even-keeled folks. But one area where we're a little sensitive on is taxes.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, explain your view on taxes in terms of, should they be raised? Should they be raised on whom should they be raised if you want them to be raised? Or should they be lowered? Sales tax, income tax, what is your stance?
Well, first of all, I think taxes should be fair. And we have a progressive income tax at our federal level, which means that people who are making more money pay a little bit more. I think that should be true here. And so I favored the so-called fair share tax, which the Supreme Judicial Court just said was not constitutional on a technicality. And I think they were wrong on that decision. So that would have brought in $2 billion, $1 billion for infrastructure. We have crumbling roads and bridges, a crumbling water system, and we haven't been paying for that. We needed that money. Secondly, it would have brought in $1 billion for education. We are many billions behind in our education. So here's the way I look at taxes. They should be fair, and they should pay for things that people really want. Often, nobody likes to pay taxes because we don't have that much money, and we think it's not going to lead to real benefit, or the money's going to get stolen or wasted. But if we do think there's real benefit, then sometimes people are willing to say, I'm going to put down a few extra dollars. Now let me give you an example. If you just say, how much does something cost? Let me just pick a number out of the air. Let's say it's going to cost us $10 billion to do a statewide transportation. Well, that's a lot of money. We don't want to do that. But let's say it brought $25 billion of new economic activity. Let's say it revitalized and strengthened North Central Mass, that it improved the ability of Fitchburg and Leominster and other to attract more businesses or to have people live out here because they could commute better. So the questions you should ask is, what do we really want? What benefit would it give us? What are others doing? Other states, other competitors doing? What will it cost us if we don't do it? And that's important. I spend most of my time in traffic. You know, it's glamorous running as a statewide candidate, but not really, because mostly you're in traffic. You know, it can take me 2 hours to get from Somerville to Sterling, 40 miles. It can take me 3 hours to get down, and that's true for everybody. So we look at, what does it cost us if we don't do it, and then how much would the price be, and then how do we pay for it? I would be the governor who would go out and say, look, we can be a second-class state, which is where we are headed right now because we are not having the conversations and we are not making the commitments, or we can do like our ancestors and invest in our future. Now, where that plays out in the exact tax amount, but here's an interesting problem. We cut taxes about 20 years ago. We lowered the income tax a little bit each year. What did that do? It stripped $30 billion out of the public money that we could have spent on schools, roads, infrastructure, and so forth. Are we happy with the state of our roads today? Are we happy that we did that? I think a lot of people would say, looking back on that, maybe I got an extra $100. I appreciated that, but now it's taken me 3 times longer to get anywhere in the state.
Where do you draw the line when you say progressive income tax? People making more than $300,000 a year, $400,000, $500,000?
Well, in the case of the Fair Share Amendment, it was that on the second $1 million of income. So, for example, I'm sure you make $1 million a year, and that would be at the same normal rate. But if you made a second $1 million, you would pay 4%. Right? This is for people who make more than $20,000 a week. So, and I think that was a perfectly reasonable level, and that's why I think the Supreme Court was wrong.
The opponents argue that it would cause flight of wealthy individuals from the state. What's your response to that?
They want to go to New Hampshire? They can. They want to go to northern Maine? They can. Massachusetts is a beautiful state with enormous assets. People want to live here, and it's not because they would pay an extra, from their standpoint, couple of quarters out of their pocket. No, people do not rip up all their ties, sell their house, and move because of an extra $5,000 or $10,000. It just doesn't happen. So I think that's a false argument.
We have a little more than 5 minutes left. It goes fast.
Oh yeah, it sure does. Yeah.
So. So you have a challenge up ahead against Jay Gonzalez in the primary, and then your reward.
Yes.
If you were to succeed, is arguably an even bigger challenge if you look at the polls.
Polls, we just learned in the New York race, don't matter at all. I mean, there was a young woman who was outspent 10, 20 to 1 who didn't get any endorsements, and she just became the nominee for Congress. But anyway, to allow your point.
But if you are successful in the primary, you go up against Governor Baker.
Right.
Popular governor, depending on which poll or which study you look at, either one of the most or the most popular governor in the state.
Right.
You have experience in when you were with Mark Roosevelt running for lieutenant governor, going up against a popular, moderate Republican governor, and didn't go so well in 1994.
Right.
However, so
very, very different scenario.
Yeah, and that was my question.
Yeah.
How do you prevent a repeat if you become the nominee to go up against Charlie Baker? How do you prevent a repeat of that?
Well, that's an excellent question, and let me tell you why it's Very different. In this particular case, if I become the nominee, I'm going to be part of a coordinated campaign with Elizabeth Warren. Now, Charlie Baker says, I have $8 million, I can't be beaten. Elizabeth Warren raised $42 million last time. She had 46 field offices. And this time she's going to raise more. Then we also have Maura Healey, a popular attorney general with offices and supporters. Plus, I have lots of. So we're going to be a coordinated campaign. And also, Elizabeth Warren got 600,000 more votes than Charlie. Charlie just squeaked in. A lot of people didn't. They blanked their vote. He got 40,000. Plus, the other thing is Trump. Now, I know Charlie Baker's tried to keep a distance from Trump, but look, he's raising money for Trump. He's bypassing and I would say laundering money to give $43,000 a pop to the Republican Governors Association. He is supporting many of Trump's policies, and he is a Republican. And he now, because he didn't vote for Trump, he now does everything with an eye on what Trump thinks. He didn't go to any of the major marches that we have been having or that we're going to have. He doesn't make a statement. He doesn't come out in person. And you know what? When Trump said that the reason he lost in New Hampshire is because so many of us crossed the border and voted illegally, and Governor Baker was asked about that, he should have said, Mr. President, respectfully, you are slandering my people. What he actually said was, I don't know what goes on in New Hampshire. So he may be a nice guy, he's not the right guy for right now, when we need bold leadership to set us on a path to a prosperous future. And I'm actually really excited because I think Charlie Baker's poll numbers are much softer. That big number is full of somewhat. I somewhat approve of him. And those somewhats may like him, but when they decide what kind of future they want, I don't think they're going to vote for Charlie Baker. I think they're going to look for the kind of bold progressive that I am and have been.
And I mean, there are conservatives that accuse him of being a rhino, a Republican in name only.
Right.
Namely, and possibly one reason why Scott Lively did so well at the Republican convention, relatively
Right, so
speaking.
what does that mean? It means that the governor is going to have to try to show that he's as pro-Trump as he can in order to appeal to the Scott Lively voters, while at the same time telling unenrolled voters that he doesn't have anything to do. That's a barbed wire fence that he can't straddle forever. So I just think that this is a different situation. We have seen remarkable wins: Virginia, New Jersey, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New York, even in Alabama. We have a unusual candidate, black woman running in Georgia for governor. So it's a different year. And I think that what people are looking for is someone with a backbone, a vision, a willingness really fight for people. And I don't think these left-right things really matter anymore. I am a progressive, but I'm also a populist. And as governor, I will be thinking about working families, people who are struggling just to get from paycheck to paycheck. That's the kind of governor I want to be, a people's governor who fights for a justice economy.
We do have Trump. We do have President Trump.
Right.
He was elected. He wasn't elected, and he's not particularly popular in Massachusetts. He does have his supporters in Massachusetts.
Yeah. And many of them, if you don't mind, many of them are people who are upset about the loss of the American dream, and I understand that.
But having just 2 minutes left,
okay.
there is just something I just wanted to ask you, though.
Sure.
All right. Now, Donald Trump was elected president. Doug Jones was elected senator in Alabama.
Right.
Doug Jones is not a liberal. He's not a progressive. He's a relatively moderate Democrat who could possibly to the right of Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. Do you find it a struggle being someone as a self-described progressive? Do you feel that it would appear from the outside that we are trending more conservative? Do you agree or disagree?
I actually disagree. Now, as I said very briefly, and I apologize for interrupting you, there are people who are desperate for change. They see their lives are not working as well as they want. They're having trouble with the home and the school and the doctor and the job. They don't see us getting ready. So they're frustrated. And when given the choice to hit the change button or the same button, they hit the change button, which was the big red Trump button. Now, I just want to point out, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and if 100,000 votes had shifted in some of the electoral college states, we wouldn't have Trump. He didn't get a huge popular mandate, but he did get the benefit of frustrations, and he promised to work for working people. And he has abandoned that problem, put corporate CEOs in who are gutting the protections for folks. So no, I think Progressives represent the tradition of the Democratic Party, but even more broadly, the tradition of the United States. We believe in equality, in inclusion, in liberty, in the ability of people to have the freedom and to be able to rise up on the basis of their energy and their enthusiasm and opportunity. Those are things that are dwindling, and I think progressives who stand up for decent schools and for creating jobs, who do not want to give the world's biggest tax break to rich people, which Trump just did. No, I think we're in good shape. And if you look around the country, the number of people who are engaged in politics today, I think we're going to do well nationally, not just Democrats, but people who want change. And I think we're going to do just fine here in Massachusetts. And I believe, I would like to ask for the support of your viewers. I hope you will look.
Our camera right there.
Okay,
you got about
I'd
20
like to ask
seconds
for your
left.
support. Please go to my website, Bob Massie 2018, and see if you think my life story and my commitments over 40 years and my energy and my desire to move forward on your behalf, I would love to have your vote. And I would love to keep coming back. I've said I will move the governor's office 2 days a month to some part of the state that feels a little overlooked. So we'll bring that governor's office right here to Fitchburg, and you can come see me in person.
We'll carve out a little space at 982 South Street in Fitchburg.
Wherever you like.
Bob Massie, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate the chance.